Well, it's that time again. Yeah, it's time to talk about classic Doctor Who. Unfortunately, and as I'm doing this, I'm going through my own personal collection of Doctor Who episodes, and I don't have all of the episodes of Pertwee, despite the fact that I have seen all of them. Unlike Hartnell and Troughton, I haven't seen all of those. I've seen quite a bit, but there's only so many available, you know. Although I've recently come into possession of some animated versions of Troughton, and I'll get to that at some point, so I guess we'll jump back to Troughton. But speaking of Troughton, he comes back again for the episode that I'm coming to here. Unfortunately, I missed out on Day of the Daleks, the Sea Devils, the Mutants, and the Time Monster, but we did get to talk about the Curse of Peladon, which I have. But I don't have copies of those episodes, which is sad because some pretty significant and good episodes. But anyway, so going in for season 10 of John Pertwee's Doctor. It was 1973, so that meant it had been 10 years that Doctor Who had been on the air, so they decided to do something special. And so, of course, this brought us the Three Doctors. Now, of course, Troughton was readily available, and of course, this was your first chance to see his Doctor in color. And it was great, and the back and forth between him and Pertwee was pretty damn good. They actually made kind of a comedy duo. Probably should have worked together in something else too. But sadly, Hartnell, his health, of course, had continued to deteriorate since he had left the show, which is the reason why he had to leave it, and they had to move on with another actor, and invented the idea of regeneration and all that. And as the story goes, is that they contacted him to see if he would be interested in shooting some scenes for the show. And he said, oh, yeah, he would love to. And then his wife got back to them and said, look, that must have been one of his good days because he's really not up for that. And so then they had to quickly come up with an idea of how he could be in it. And, of course, he's briefly in the special. So they shot some scenes where he's pretty much by himself, and they made up this story about, well, this doctor got stuck in a time eddy or what have you, and they couldn't quite bring him in to the third doctor's timeline to help him out like the second doctor was. And so that's how they did it. And for all intents and purposes for the plot of the show, it works. But it's just, it's one of those sad things. It's also curious that each time they have these anniversary specials where they bring back previous doctors to meet the current one, there's always a doctor who can't make it. So down the road, when Peter Davison is the doctor, Tom Baker, who was almost in it, there was all kind of negotiations and whatnot. And then he inevitably backed out of it, which is unfortunate, and even he admits he greatly regrets not having done it. It's a moment in time, and now it's gone. So they came up with a thing of where his doctor got stuck again in another eddy, what have you. And so that's how they did that. And then finally, with the new Who series, you had... they only went with the doctors of their era. They weren't going to bring them all in, and that's who was left, And, of course, Tom Baker did have a cameo in that one. But Eccleston still pretty mad at BBC and whatnot, and no, not doing it. And that's why they had to hurry up and shoehorn the War Doctor in and all that. Which, despite my great respect and admiration of John Hurt, I just don't think the War Doctor was a good idea. But I haven't been able to hear his War Doctor episodes from Big Finish. I need to get on that, so that maybe it was all worth it for that alone. But it creates all kinds of problems that I just don't see them working out. They don't seem to deal with their continuity with Doctor Who, and I'm not sure why. But anyway. So it's interesting, right from the beginning, there's always some problem, and yet Hartnell, despite his health and whatnot, does more than those other two doctors did. Specials and plays a pivotal role in this story. So it starts off, scientists or what have you, researchers, what have you, are disappearing, and then suddenly these gelatin creatures appear, and it all goes to the antimatter universe, and it's revealed that, oh, whatever this force is after the Doctor himself. And eventually the Time Lords come in on this, and this is where we get to see more of the Time Lords as they're going to appear from now on, meaning they're no longer godlike. They're more just sort of this bureaucratic policeman type thing, and they're not flawless or what have you. In War Games, they very much appeared to be godlike, and the Doctor was literally terrified of them. And now they're a bit of a nuisance, and their feet are coming to Earth, and eventually they're just kind of silly bureaucrats, more or less, in space. But here they're in trouble because, and it does fit in with it that the ultimate villain here, who's actually more of a sympathetic, sad character, in that of Omega. Omega over here, but Omega is how he pronounces his name, so Omega it is. Omega was one of their founding fathers, if you will, of Time Lord Society. And I think since they've embellished the story a bit, where Rassilon kind of pulled a fast one on him, because now we know that Rassilon's a bit of an a-hole. He's not a good guy. But their ability to time travel was through the experiment of Omega, but it left him trapped in the antimatter world, and the Time Lords believed he had died in this, but he wasn't dead, and he was alone in this antimatter world. And apparently, through his sheer force of will, he's basically become a god of this planet, I guess, that he created within this realm. And he's seeking to lure the Doctor to take his place while he returns to get revenge on the Time Lords and all this sort of thing. So, and in order for the Doctor to be able to stand up to him, the Time Lords, they can't spare any of their own, because they're trapped with whatever the Omega's black hole is doing to them. So they have to violate their laws of time and call out to one of the Doctor's previous incarnations, so that there would now be two Time Lords going up against Omega. This, of course, was the second Doctor appears, and then they realize, wow, this is really serious if they're going to allow this. They said it's quite a violation, and you're not supposed to do that. And yet it happens quite often in Doctor Who, because like when Colin Baker was there, he meets up with the second Doctors, and they title it The Two Doctors. So this sort of thing can happen, and you would expect it would be inevitable from all the time traveling, and since he frequents the same places over and over again, sooner or later you're going to bump into yourself. But the thing about the Time Lords is, because of their ability to regenerate, and actually not just regenerate, but become other people, the differences and whatnot in their shapes probably makes this possible, to where they did an episode later in Peter Davison's series where the Brigadier met a younger version of himself, and when they met each other in touch, there was this, like a spark or whatever, knocked them out and all this sort of thing. Like, you're not supposed to do that. But with the Time Lords, unless you're meeting an earlier version of yourself as you are now, it probably wouldn't have that reaction. So when you have a different incarnation of yourself, it kind of cheats that rule, I would think. And so that's how they're able to do it. And they don't, zap each other out, like the two Brigadiers did. So anyway, you get a lot of interesting. The Three Doctors is not one of the better episodes of Pertwee's tenure and all that, but it's significant because of the tenets of the lore of Doctor Who that it lays down, and you get a lot of insight in that. And of course, Omega becomes this figure from Time Lord history, and we'll meet him again later. And if you go by Big Finish, you'll meet him again too. So anyway. The interesting aspect here was that his sheer force of will, that he became omnipotent practically in this realm. I'm assuming, of course, and I guess by the Peter Davison Arc of Infinity, which is kind of a sequel to this one, when Omega returns, and actually is able to cross over into the Mantor universe, at least for a while anyway. He doesn't have all his godlike powers anymore, so I'm thinking this is only something he can possess within the antimatter realm. But the interesting aspect here is that they ultimately reveal that he's no longer a corporal being. He no longer has a body. He's just pure thought. So by the time you get to Arc of Infinity, when I rewatch it, I'm guessing there'll be a mention of this, that he somehow managed to achieve some sort of substance with his plot there. But here, he's not. He doesn't realize this until he has the doctors take his helmet off, and there's nothing in there. Poor bastard. And that's the thing. He's been driven insane by the condition he's in. He wasn't initially an evil man, but he suffered horribly, and there's no way to save him. And so there's some amount of touchingness there that the doctor's a bit kind of feels bad about what they had to do. They ultimately have to trick him into letting them escape, and seemingly is destroyed, but we know better. So there's a lot of cool stuff in it. Whether they come up with these ideas, of course, the effects was just not there, but the whole of the unit is transported to this antimatter world. Stuff like, and there's funny reactions from the Brigadier. He's never been in the TARDIS until this episode, and then there's him and Benton, and so you get a lot of firsts here. And then he says, and of course, immediately the Brigadier, so this is what you've been doing with Unit 5. I mean, come on. That's your tax dollars at work. so you get some good moments here, and of course the back and forth between Pertwee and Troughton is pretty good, and of course it's great to see Troughton in color. So there you go. And ultimately, the Second Doctor's recorder saves the day. They're all back safe and sound. And then, of course, the Doctor returns. And I'd also interested with the thing about with Hartnell's Doctor and how they were to come up with their ultimate plan of victory was they introduced and pretty much established, and of course with the Master and whatnot, with his ability of hypnosis, and so you can see and that the Time Lords do have telepathic abilities, and here the Doctors make telepathic communication between the three of them to where they can put their brains together and come up with a plan to take on Omega, who is far more powerful than they are. And so that's how that works out. So there was plenty of clues here and there, and most notably, I would think, is when back in Troughton in the War Games, when he first encounters the War Chief, and just by seeing each other, they immediately recognize each other as Time Lords. And then later on, you even have Tennant's Doctor say a Time Lord always knows another Time Lord. Well, how could that be when they keep changing their appearances? Well, it's a telepathic thing, a sense of sorts that they have with each other. So good stuff. Probably, not one of the best episodes, what have you. There's little goofy things here and there, but nevertheless establishes some very important aspects of the lore of Doctor Who, and it's always fun to see the Doctors interact. It's sad about Hartnell. It would have been great if he could have actually been in the TARDIS with them, but that's the way things are. The Three Doctors. Do check it out if you haven't. It's a vital and a significant part and chapter in the overall lore of Doctor Who. All right, our next episode. No, it's not Carnival of Monsters. Yes, I've seen it, of course, and I read the novel first before and the novelizations of Doctor, if you haven't, check those out, because boy, your imagination makes it what it could have been if they just had the budget for it. But still, it's a good show. But I just don't have the copy of it. I'm only going by my own collection of Doctor Who episodes. So the next one will be Frontier in Space. Join me when that happens. But next up for my classic sci-fi will be another episode of Star Trek. But anyway, when we get back to Doctor Who, Frontier in Space, it will be. Thank you for watching and listening. Say, why not like and subscribe, and check out that link description below. That'll take you to my many stores that have plenty of goodies for you. Yes, that's right, you. It also has a link to my podcast on RadioMisfits.com, The Mr Nailsin Show. And you might want to subscribe to me at BitChute. Yes, that other video platform where you can find my videos. And who knows, one day it may be the only place you can find them. The Mr Nailsin channel on BitChute.